daría. Qué golpe no llevaría, una mujer me llamaba, pero yo no le entendí.
A 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. You have a chance of winning a luxurious royal ride, Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Lewis Appliances, Corner Trackwood Road and Edward Street. Caribbean Jewelers, Twin City Mall. Mandarin Mini Mart St. Anne's. A. Moses and Sons, 181 Trackwood Road. Quaysay Supermarket, Calcutta Road number 2. Strive Restaurant and Bar, Mukarapa Road. New Car and Auto Shop, West Mall. First Priority Music, Gulf City Mall. SNSR Food Center, Princesstown. Quaysay Best Price, St. Mary's Junction. Romaines Hardware, Marava. Cascade Minimart. Kelly Supermarket, Digger Mountain Main Road. The Unit Trust Agency in West Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College Christmas 3-car raffle.
WESN.
As the world turns, this small twin island nation continues chugging along for better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us only get relief. That's what it feels like sometimes. Please don't take that literally. In part because we keep spinning around. The world turns and so do we, but we turn like a top spinning in mud. Will we see significant changes to how things are done? Significant improvements to how things are operated, how things are governed, how things are maintained, how things are everything? Generally speaking, if you think about it, have the complaints of the people who are not necessarily concerned with blame. There's two types of concerns. There's the ones that are more worried about who to blame for what, and then there's the other type of concern where you just want the problem fixed. And in that regard, that second group there, has it changed that much? Now, granted, it hasn't been that long from one administration to the next, but from the things that I observe and the things that concern me from the beginning, the initial things, how you say what you say, how you start what you start, how you present what you present, has it changed? We do have to worry about things getting, a little bit spicy to our southwest. And by spicy, that's literally trying to put it lightly, because try not to be too heavy all the time. Try not to be over the top sensational all the time. There's a lot of that on the internet if that's what you want. There's a lot of cheerleading for one cause or the other on the internet if that's what you want. There's a lot of things are imminent, so-and-so is under threat, and a lot of buzzwords that are very alarmist and sensationalist, which ultimately will only raise most of your pressure if you take that seriously. Meanwhile, we have domestic things to be concerned about. One of the things that I wanted to point out, and I don't know necessarily what this totally means, but you remember a while back, there was a former Minister of Public Utilities, and he had hopes to transform WASA. Now, even before, there was talk after the restructuring of Petrotrin, and which included shutting down the refinery, which in hindsight seemed like a very bad move, considering that in hindsight, there were indicators that the justification for shutting down the refinery didn't make sense, indicators that I didn't necessarily have, but indicators that were kind of basic and clear. Now, after Petroleum was supposed to be WASA, and then years went by, we didn't see anything. Minister Gonzalez gets appointed. We don't really see anything to deal with some of the very same issues, potentially, that you find in URP and CPEP. Because, make no mistake, ghost employees were probably a thing even before ghost gangs. And while the URP and CPEP ghost gangs might have been eliminated by just sinking the whole ship, there's still that issue of ghost employees. They collect a check, they don't even show up. You get jobs for people so that they could pay your rent. You only care that they show up when they have to show up so you don't look bad. You don't actually care if they show up to do the job that you got them. That's one incident I know of. Philosophically speaking, if you think about it, if you think it through, the current administration is looking to change how things are done. Part of that is just, procedurally, technically, systematically, and it has nothing to do with demographics and voters and constituents and all of that. Part of that is because there probably was a thought that certain groups were benefiting under the last regime more than other groups, and now they want to redistribute the benefits. And of course, the issue is who is going to view that negatively, and then you go from that point to who's going to view that as racist. And that's why now we probably have we've opened the door on a whole new rounds of debate about which politician is more racist than whichever politician. What you generally don't see is consistency across the board. And again, could someone guarantee to me that WASA is an entity being operated healthily that didn't need any sort of change? Inconsistencies, and there's another inconsistency with regards to certain campaign promises and how people are being treated. But I'll point out something that I pointed out before that technically to me is an inconsistency. The property tax is evil, malicious, wicked, vile, unethical, inhumane. How dare you inflict that on the population? They can't afford it. They can't afford it. But we can't afford to refund you, those of you who paid, because we assume all of you are 1%. All of you are 1%. So fire burn you. We can't afford to refund the thing that you apparently couldn't afford to pay. That was the messaging. The messaging before the election doesn't seem to be consistent with the messaging with the election. So when you go to CPEP and URP, no one is saying that, at least I hope not. I would disagree if anyone does. If anyone says that CPEP and URP was fine, and I don't have any statistics to back up that it wasn't fine, but it was a legitimate common health concern, widespread enough where, at the very least, any government would be seen as right to look into the situation and attempt to fix it. It's just that inconsistencies. We want to deal with the areas that didn't benefit us politically. But the areas that did, no, we need to protect those. Because CPEP URP, the thought was, hey, the PNM benefits politically from those things. That's the dependency. Now you feel dependent on the PNM if you have a CPEP and URP job. So you vote for them. And now that the UNC has proven that they're more or less willing to cut out your legs out from underneath you, ironically, depending on how things go moving forward, you're telling that demographic of people in the future, you were right. We will not look out for you. You have to take your chances with the P&M. Stay there. I don't know if anyone realized that they were pushing members of the public away, but And in this case, it's not about race. At least I don't think so. But hey, WASA was given a political promise. The PSA was given a political promise. So now you have one political party that said we want to restructure you and get rid of the waste and make changes. And we don't know for sure if all of the changes were good or if all the changes were bad. But now we're in a situation where the party line is, oh, we don't need to change nothing. We don't need to change nothing. Does anyone really believe that? But hey, they gave political support in the last election. So now, dare I say, what may have been going on with CPEP and URP, the political dependency, we want our jobs, we need to vote for these people to keep our jobs. Are we going to see that with certain entities that threw their hat in the ring for the current administration? And that doesn't have to be the intention, you know. I'm not saying that this was some grand master strategy to get the PSA, in bed with the UNC, whatever. But psychologically speaking, people will eventually reach that point on their own. Also, the fact that we're a zero-sum game. So if you support one party, the other party isn't going to try to figure out how to win you back. They're just going to write you off and push you further in that direction, more often than not. So sometimes the net result is actually a combination of the person who's doing the pulling, but also the opposition who's rejecting and pushing from behind. But the heavy-handed approach to CPEP and URP, as opposed to the kids' gloves approach to WASA. Now, remember when the former Minister of Public Utilities was concerned that the CEO was having to report to junior employees with no executive experience, something that the current Minister of Public Utilities, I believe, denied. Except it worked out that one of those junior employees eventually replaced the CEO when the CEO was no longer in that position. Only to find out recently that he, according to Mr. Joseph himself, resigned for personal reasons, which is a claim that I cannot 100% easily accept. It might be true, but for me to fully believe in it to be the absolute truth is not 100% easy, because he said he is considering his future options. Now, it could be because there were some very specific reasons why he had to leave the job, but if it's personal reasons why it's not going to work out, but you're ready to move on with your professional career, it's not like we're talking about, oh, I have to move back to the United States. I don't believe he said that. He's dismissing reports that he was not sent on leave just 5 months into the role of acting CEO. All right, fine. But I don't know, you accept a position, you accept such an important position, only to say I have personal reasons. I must resign, not even a year in. Those have to be some real good personal reasons, because it sends a bad message to any future employer. Now, the minister is saying it's not affecting plans for WASA, that WASA was far advanced with several short-term and medium-term projects. That's nice. What does that mean? One of the things that I am wary of is when politicians say things without actually saying things. Saying that you have projects doesn't actually show us that you have projects. Show, don't tell. We have a very strong, competent team at WASA headed by its chairman. Therefore, our operations and management have continued without any hiccups. What is it currently, within the last year, with the heads of entities being sent on leave? No, they weren't sent on leave. They left on their own accord. No, they didn't leave on their own accord. Well, we don't know what's going on. State Emergency, prison, head of prisons. State Emergency, head of the defense force. WASA, big political football over the election. Big political football with the change of CEO, and now this. What's going on? Because the explanations, to be fair, are not outside the realm of possibility. It's just, I'm seeing too much smoke. I'm seeing too much smoke, and the fire extinguishers, aka the public relations efforts to explain the situation, without necessarily revealing all of the information, without necessarily having to reveal how the sausage is made, it's like you had to recall a bad batch, but you don't want to say that you recall a bad batch. You just want to say, well, you know, our operations on sausage making is going well. That's nice. What does that mean? Inconsistencies of how you operate. Listen, one of the issues I had with the PNM was their inconsistencies. Oh, the borders are closed? Didn't feel closed to me. It just felt closed to the people who legally were trying to do the right thing to come home during the pandemic. It just felt closed to certain groups of people, because that's the thing that people can't take. It's one thing to have a harsh measure. It's another thing to then have loopholes in that measure, to treat the members of the population differently for what is easily speculated to be very unpleasant reasons. And people are saying, John, why are you so hard on the UNC? Why are you so hard on the administration? It's because if I wanted more of the same, then I would have been like, why are we getting rid of the PNM? Let them stay. Yes, some of the policies are different, but the policies are different with regards to what are we trying to accomplish and who benefits from that accomplishment. And potentially, certain things we might see better results. That's the key. Not just doing something different for the same results. We want to see better results. But with regards to the moves that were done within the last few months, I'm not really seeing better results. Better results in communication, better results in trust and confidence, better results in implementation. The rehabilitation plan, if that is pulled off, that is something where I'll say, oh, I see a better result. It doesn't even have to give us 100% of what was proposed. Even 50% is a better result from what we were looking at under the previous regime. But with regards to how the public sector is being managed, with regards to how the budget's being managed, hey, do you think the Minister of Finance took a victory lap when presenting the budget? It was almost as though he thought the budget presentation was the championship game, not realizing the budget presentation is really the opening match for the season. Because the budget presentation, then you need to follow up with managing the country for the rest of the year. So he takes a victory lap of a budget presentation, not too dissimilar to his predecessor, by the way. Except, at least his predecessor didn't say the deficit is around $3+ billion, only to then admit, we didn't budget a thing. And now, potentially, it's going to cost us almost $4 billion. And then when you think about it, just that one thing alone is going to double the deficit or more. Well, if I wanted things like that, I'm going to stick with Imbit. Why bother? That's one of the things that I don't understand, how political operations will always fall back down to the mean, will always continue either the average level or the lowest common denominator, however you want to view it. And to be fair, listen, I don't always like the tone and tenor of the opposition chief whip. But when it comes to WASA specifically, while I do wish he would take some of the emotion out of it, I understand to some extent that he's upset. They shouldn't necessarily reveal the extent by which he's upset, because I don't think it helps the effectiveness of his message, but I understand it's a human reaction. And in this regard now, I have to question, are we even getting the similar level? Or is WASA going to get worse? I have to ask. Because if the CEO position wasn't important, you would have made a change. No one could say, as far as I'm aware, that the previous guy was not qualified. So you decided, no, we want to change. Because we have an agenda to execute and we need to change. That's what making the change implies, that you need this guy to change the direction to suit your political agenda, which is not meant in a bad way. Every administration has its own agenda, has its own priorities. That's fine. That's fine. You make a change soon after the election. That implies heavily that I need to make this change to execute the policies that I want to prioritize. That's also fine in a way. Questionable about the process, but for him to leave 5 months later, that's like saying we want to change the head coach. We are now the GM of the team. We were now hired by the owners of the team to be the GM of the team, if you follow American sports, right? We are now the manager, not the football managers and the coach, but we are now the GM of the team. We deal with all of the operational decisions, right? Cool. And we immediately fire the coach because we want our own coach. We want our own coach to do what we want to do to enact our vision of how this team is supposed to function. And then partway through the first season, he bolts. Personal reasons. And you know what? Maybe it was personal reasons. Maybe it was. Maybe he had a very serious family emergency, although if it's along those lines, it kind of doesn't sound like it's along those lines. But let's just say it is. It will feel unfair to criticize them for that. But here's the problem. Here's the catch. This isn't managing a corner store. This isn't managing a fast food retail outlet. This isn't even managing a conglomerate. This is running a country. There are no do-overs with running a country. It doesn't matter if there's a good excuse or not, a good explanation or not, when it comes to running a country. Everything that's amiss will negatively impact you down the line. And it's not just going to impact you. You see, if it's a company, then it's your profits. Then it's your job. Then it's your reputation. If it's a country, then it's our country, our economy, our livelihoods. Property tax is wicked. Oh, but we have a thing. It's not property tax. We're just taxing properties on rents. But we promise you it's not property tax. It's the inconsistencies I can't take, because the real implication on the inconsistencies is not that there's immorality or a lack of ethics or anything like that. The real issues with the inconsistencies is that long-term thought is not put into this endeavor. And while I very much dislike the use of the term when it comes to government, running the country by VAPs. And to be fair, it's not too dissimilar to how it felt sometimes under the PNM. And the reason why I say these things now, because people want to say, give them a chance, give them a chance, it's too hard. It's like, time out. You say these things now because it's limited to just these things. You don't want to wait until you have an Auditor General scandal, and a merit list scandal, and a COVID border scandal, and an FUL scandal, and a Brent Thomas scandal, and a Paria scandal. You don't want to wait until it gets there. You want to say it now when the situation is relatively benign, when it now starts, and when the actual people in charge have an opportunity to course correct or change or to adjust depending on how your perspective is. Because I might be wrong, and maybe they have evidence to say I'm wrong. That's cool. But you say it up front. You don't tell your friend, I always knew your spouse was going to cheat on you. Well, after they cheat, if that's your friend and you saw signs of cheating, you don't wait until the person discovers it. You see your friend's spouse cheating. You're like, well, I ain't going to say nothing. I ain't going to say nothing. Meanwhile, you call this person your friend. You call this person your friend, you go to their house, and you say all the nice things about their spouse. Meanwhile, the spouse cheats on them, and you know. What good does it do your friend for you to say, well, I knew for like 2 years, buddy. I'm sorry. What good does that do then? When they were allowed not to just be a victim in the situation, but to also continue to be a victim in the situation. More importantly, what about if you see your friend maybe looking to do the wrong thing? You see your friend, you know he's going to do something stupid. You know he's going to do something like cheat on his wife because he's looking at another woman the wrong way. You don't say nothing. But then when it comes out after the fact, you want to act as though, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever. No. That's your friend. You need to be upfront. If it's really a friend, then he could take constructive criticism and harsh truths. If the government is for the people, they could take harsh truths from the people. The trick is, in politics, the politicians are so polarized. The politics is so polarizing that any criticism is seen as opposition from the other side. Any criticism is seen as things to be ignored because it's coming from our political opponents and it's not meant to help us. Or it's coming from stupid people because obviously if they disagree with us, they're stupid. Because we are the smartest people in the room. We are always the smartest people in the room. Look, we beat the PNM. That means we're the smartest. No, that just means you beat an unpopular government. I am not a PNM supporter like that. I am a supporter of anybody that does anything good. So when they had things that I agreed with, I agreed with it. I praised them for it. I tried to praise what I saw as positive behavior then, and I try to do so now. But I have no inherent bias for either party. I didn't want to see the PNM fail. I wanted to see them succeed because they were government day. I want to see this government succeed because they're the government day. I don't criticize anybody because I want to see them fail and I hate them. I don't try to find nonsense data about HDC apartments that were on the open market and act as though somehow they were meant for poor people to try to prove a point that doesn't exist. Notice all of a sudden that's no longer a priority. Huh? It came up just in time for the election and it died down just as fast. I wonder why. I don't know if it's in social media, but I'm just talking about the wider national. I haven't seen anything, so pardon me. We want to develop, we need to be mature. We want to be mature, well, we have to make a decision to be mature. I don't know. At this point, I feel politics is too much of a competition and a game. Competition is too tribal, politics is too tribal, and lines are drawn And now it's who's going to win and who's going to lose. The problem is the battleground is Trinidad and Tobago. And we're concerned about a battleground happening in Venezuela for good reason. Well, what do you think if our country is constantly a political battleground? What do you think happens then? We're concerned about Venezuela destabilizing if the Americans go in. What do you think is happening to our stability because of this political battleground that is called Trinidad and Tobago, where there is no political peace? None. There's never political peace. What do you think is the fallout, the unintended consequences, the unintended casualties of this nonsense? And it takes two to tango, but in this case, it's not really two. It's four. You see, you have the two parties, but then you have their supporters. And the supporters, while technically supporting the party, one would hope, wait, are they just arms? It's a democracy. They're not supposed to be complete and total wings and lemmings of the party, one would hope. It's just frustration at this point that for whatever reason bubbled up today, because I'm looking at some of the news today and I'm just saying, hey, this is not making that much sense to me. Why does it feel as though we have a different coat of paint, but it's more or less the house is in the same state almost? Congratulations. We have to wait and see just how much the deficit is going to grow by this one thing. We'll speak about that a little bit later, but we're going to take a break right now. Talking Point, Shawn Michael Small, WSN. We'll bring it back after this.
Three-car raffle organized on behalf of Queen's Royal College. First prize is a Royal Ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Sandbag Lotto opposite the Oval. Northern Hardware, Diggle Martin Main Road. West Star Liquor Mart, Montcoco Road. Top Office, Belmont. Hearty Foods Arima. Charlie's Anchor Cafe. Corner Anna Street and Aripita Avenue. Frankie's on the Avenue. Quasi Discount Mart, California. Universal Plumbing, Diggle Martin Main Road. Woodview, Tragrit Road. GAK Electrical and Plumbing opposite Starlight. Western Union, Tunapuna. VML Minimart, St. Lucian Road. Arthur's Minimart, Balandra. Alums Pharmacy, Majuma Crossroad. Madison Bar, Diggle Martin. Auto and Lotto Shop, Long Circular Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queen's Royal College, Christmas three-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
We feel that about 50% of women who are infertile or subfertile, endometriosis is an underlying factor. So it used to play a role.
Half of the women
who
present with infertility problems will turn out to have
an underlying
endometriosis
endometriosis as a cofactor affecting their fertility.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
I'm back here and talking about on WESN, the content capital, and one of the things that caught my eye was a social media post from the Prime Minister. It's a while ago, but it comes across with regards to the whole situation with the radar. And she ascribes an interesting line of thought, which, to be fair, I can't necessarily discredit. So, as you can see in the first post there, we have suffered for decades with violent, out-of-control murders and crime. The majority are happy for the help we are getting. Well, the majority are happy for help, right? I don't think anyone has been presented with the question, are you fine if this is what needs to be done for the Americans to help us? Are you fine with them, striking pirogues of suspected drug traffickers? Which the majority probably are. I just don't have evidence, so I can't say outright 100% they are, right? I can't say it because I don't know it to be true as a matter of fact, but we suspect that it is mostly true, if not completely true. But she goes on to say, I encourage citizens to look at the persons, politicians, groups, businesses, and media that are actively against the drug interdiction efforts. When people show you who they are, believe them. It's not surprising that the PNM, a party long suspected of being financed by the local drug mafia and connected to numerous allegations of pedophilia, will be against the government's anti-drug, anti-human trafficking efforts. The PNM are concerned with covering up allegations of pedophilia within their hierarchy, as well as protecting the illegal profits of their drug mafia financiers over the safety of citizens. And let's take a pause right there. In fact, if we could go back to the first one, because there's a part at the end there. So she goes out to name the PNM. But here's the problem. The premise is, if you are against, or what she's saying is, who are actively against the drug interdiction efforts. Now, the question I pose to you is it that you could, if you disagree with the killings, then you automatically agree with any measure to interdict drugs, because that's kind of the setup. Now, to some extent, that is how the politics are. So she's technically not wrong. But I do think that it's not being clear enough, because it's basically lumping everybody that disagrees with the whole situation as being those who disagree with drug interdiction efforts. One of the issues is that the Americans, even when they're survivors, they don't arrest the survivors. So, and that could be a rules of engagement thing, we don't know. But generally speaking, the standard that we know of, and again, we shouldn't necessarily assign a police standard to naval interdiction, law of the sea, international law. It's not the same as domestic law, which governs police units. Interpol is not a police agency, right? Interpol is not an international police agency that has authorization to go into countries and arrest people, just so. The thing is, it's lumping two issues together. Because yes, there are people who are like, do we want the US to interdict with the drug stuff, you know, breaches of sovereignty, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also the separate thing about the strikes, and the problem is, some of the critics of the situation, they themselves are not necessarily making it clear, to be fair to the Prime Minister. They themselves are not necessarily making the distinction, because to be fair to the Prime Minister, she is, when speaking about what she supports, is making the distinction, at least with regards to, well, I'm not for going into Venezuela, I want the drugs to stop. But she's not necessarily speaking on if she approves of the methods to stop the drugs. So I ask, do you think you can disagree with the methodology, but agree that we need the help and we would welcome help, but maybe not help this way? Maybe. Again, I don't know the reason. One of the things when you get to technical things like this is when you get the reasons, then you can assess it. It's difficult, as much as it appears wrong, for me to assess something when I don't know the hidden reasons why. And in situations like this, they are not behooven to explain it fully. But there are indicators that points to holes in the whole situation. Well, let's go back further. Tobago's ANC territory, the most secure they have ever been. I mean, it is probably true, because it probably doesn't take much to achieve a higher level of security than what we had. Because the assumption is we didn't have any. The assumption is we had zero, zip, zilch. And let's not forget, and one of the things is the training exercises where the Americans come in. To what extent is that to help with our law enforcement situation, anti-terrorism, anti-crime situation, right? Because one of the complaints that we've had is the Coast Guard, and they're like, yeah, let's bring the Coast Guard in. Now, maybe the previous administration set that up because, you know, they say this is something you have to ask for in advance. But the point is, we depend on the Coast Guard to secure our borders. We wanted the U.S. Navy to maybe show our Coast Guard a thing or two. I don't know what it is. Maybe that's just a mama guy story. I don't know. But it's not hard to say, yeah, our borders probably are just by default more secure now. I mean, to be fair, that is the benefit of our extremely heavy-handed approach. I am ultimately responsible for their safety and security and will ensure they never have a bloody year like 2024. 2024 murders in Tobago were mainly driven by fights for drug turf. A number of Trinidadian criminals went to Tobago and sought to create havoc with gang violence and drug trafficking. I requested a temporary radar system be installed here, and I am thankful that the US gave us one of their best systems available and the assistance to install and operate it. Let's go back to the second part where she goes into some specific claims, if we could. I don't want to say that this is true. I don't even want to repeat it, to be honest. I don't want to say that it's true. It's just that the circumstances of how our border was not secure, as well as the fact that there is, I believe, a US State Department report with regards to senior government officials being involved in human trafficking. there are things that goes in line with what the Prime Minister is saying. So I can't say what you're saying is a bridge too far. I can't say it's too speculative. I cannot say, I have to say, hey, based on the circumstantial evidence of what we do know, this is somewhat in line. Now the question is it fair to have something like this aired out in the court of public opinion? And the initial answer I have to that is it's not about fair or not. I can't control or stop this from happening. In part because at least some of it is based on practical concerns and grievances over our national security over the last 5 years at least. Now, the Prime Minister, she said that she asked for the radar system. That's very interesting. I want to move on from this post. She also said in this Twitter post that she had more to say in an interview with one of our daily newspapers. This article was in the Express yesterday. And to some extent, perhaps this is what I should have focused on. And others, right? Circulation of a single newspaper. One of the things, it would behoove me to say, hey, we should get exclusives and everything should be for us, for WSN. But with regards to the political side of things, I don't know why the politicians are like, yeah, I'll just do one interview with one person, and that's enough. I don't know why. You're supposed to make the rounds. But anyway, let me not get too much down into that rabbit hole. The Prime Minister in this article reiterated, or was reported to have reiterated, that TNT was not a US base for any attacks on Venezuela. Right? Noting that the US assets in the region are more than sufficient, which is probably true. They basically have 3 vessels by which they could easily launch helicopter-borne operations, I believe. The US owns thousands of satellites, they own GPS systems, 20% of the Navy in the Caribbean. 20% of the Navy in the Caribbean is probably not true if you go on total tonnage, but if you go on actual assets to be deployed, as in what assets they have that are currently operating and deployed, that might be true. They have about 11 supercarriers, but they don't run 11 all at the same time. With the most sophisticated military communications technology in existence is the Navy. They don't need to put a radar in our country to use for any military purpose. They could monitor the entire Caribbean from the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. Sensible people understand these facts. That is somewhat true because the American carrier has planes with airborne radar. Airborne radar could go beyond the curvature of the Earth. So that on top of the fact that the vessels themselves also have their own radar, they could deploy it in a wide pattern, right? They're not expecting a Cold War scenario where there's a Russian battle group that they have to protect themselves from. So if they want to surveil the Southern Caribbean, their naval assets are more than sufficient. I can't disagree with the Prime Minister for 2 reasons. One, I don't necessarily think the unit installed in Tobago has the range to really see far enough south for it to matter with regards to Venezuela. And 2, well, right, look at where it was placed. If you want to monitor Venezuela, why are you putting it not necessarily at the most northern point of the country, but close enough? Now, but, there's a but. Now, the Prime Minister clarified, contrary to public speculation, she was the one who requested the radar from the US Embassy months ago. It did not come about as a result of a meeting with General Kane. I would say in the meeting, they probably discussed it. Now, here's the thing. Just this morning on AM Prime, we had Dr. Evan Ellis, or I would say my colleague Naomi interviewed Dr. Ellis, had a follow-up interview. He expressed his opinion that, generally speaking, even though it might seem that these things are deployed now for now, what is usually the case is it takes a long time to get this done, to get these kind of deployments, despite the fact that the unit is a mobile unit. It's a transportable unit, right? It's not a fixed unit with concrete. It's on wheels. If you could pull up the picture of the radar again, right? It's literally meant to be towed by a truck, right? You could put it on the back of a plane. But for the US now to say, we are going to deploy one of our things, and according to the Prime Minister, this is one of their latest models. And the specs and the technical abilities are things that any nation guards closely. And when you deploy something, you risk information being revealed. You risk a lot of things. You don't just put things out in the field willy-nilly. So Dr. Ellis was saying, well, this was probably in the making for a long time. The implication was it could have been even longer than the tenure of the current administration. I'm not so sure in this case, though, because this is not normal peacetime operations. But generally speaking, the Prime Minister said she asked for it months ago, so perhaps that is the long-term period Dr. Evan Ellis was speaking about. And perhaps, yeah, the Prime Minister is pointing to security concerns, right? Months ago, I made a request to the local U.S. Embassy for U.S.-supplied radars, a temporary solution to our poor surveillance capabilities. A system will also be installed at a site in Trinidad until a permanent replacement for an ineffective existing radar system can be installed. Now, she doesn't necessarily explain why it's ineffective. One of the things is, given the fact that our borders are open, if the radar was operating properly, it's a real tall order to then say, you mean to tell me that we had this piece of equipment that no one was just using, that we were ignoring, that someone managed to convince enough people in the national security apparatus to ignore? Or maybe it broke down, or maybe it wasn't sufficient for the current challenges. I don't know if the radar that we had was able to see pirogue-sized objects at its longest ranges, because you're talking about curvature of the earth, in the waves, a small boat, the patterns of the sea. Like, there's a difference if you have look-down radar, if you have the angles, the power of the radar. Military radar has a certain level of, I don't know, granularity. Don't quote me on that with regards to the word. Because what the US supplied seemingly has about the same range as the radar that we would have had, right? The thing is, we should have, at the very least, okay, we're not going to necessarily interdict everything, but we should be able to have records of everything, to track everything. But there was a disconnect. There was a disconnect in whatever assets we supposedly had, the job wasn't getting done. So something was wrong. So it makes sense that the Prime Minister asked for assistance, right? I don't necessarily know about drug-carrying drones, but hey, maybe it is a thing. Maybe it is a thing. I don't know, right? Now, she went into commentary with regards to the current political leader of the NTA, saying this person claims that he was in charge of the radar system that we are replacing and claimed that it works properly. Well, he should also explain why for the past 10 years there was proliferation of drugs, guns, and human trafficking into Trinidad and Tobago. We had record drug trafficking, murders, and violence for 10 years because of people and equipment that failed at their jobs. So now the question is exactly what was the failure? Because it could be that the failure was human failure. With regards to the Coast Guard, we don't know exactly if it's because they didn't have gas, because the boats weren't maintained, or because somebody got a phone call, hey, don't go out on patrol tonight. Or because too much of the crew called in sick because, you know, they didn't think being in the Coast Guard might involve going out to sea for so long. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. So, this is the Prime Minister again. In situations involving classified security issues, the priority must be protecting our country and our people, and that limits what I can say. That is a very real thing, folks. That's not political speech. As much as I'm the guy that wants to point out, hey, they're kind of trying to mask nonsense with nonsense. That, unfortunately, is a very real thing. History has shown in these circumstances that is the truth, right? Now, you could debate to what extent you have to not say things and what can be revealed, but generally speaking, straight off the bat, you can't say everything. You just can't. And a lot of it you can't say. There might be some that you can, but that is potentially subjective, debatable, and even then, you could get real negative consequences even if you try to reveal the minimum sometimes. I will not disclose sensitive information about matters under classification regardless of political pressure or commentary. I don't think it's wise to broadcast the local and transnational criminal networks or national security and intelligence gathering plans. Now, on some level, you can't hide the fact that the radar is there. But you can't hide the purpose of the radar and the capabilities of the radar. Because the intention also will kind of speak to the capabilities indirectly. Huh? So asked about the declaration of the no-fly zone, the Prime Minister said that is between President Trump and Venezuela. We are focused on our national security interests. And that is that. Now, she went on to say murders are 40% down, but that is not necessarily because of, or we can't just assume that it is because of the American interdiction of drugs. Because murders were down from the first SOE. And then the reduced rate somehow maintained during the period, the 3-month period or so, without an SOE this year. And then we had another SOE, which should have had some sort of effect. Then the interdiction started. So I don't know if you could correlate those two situations directly. But drugs and illegal gun prices are up. If that is true, and I believe that to be the case, you could attribute that to the interdiction and smuggling. Fish prices remain the same. I haven't checked fish prices, I don't know. Facts are facts. It's pointless to spend time trying to convince persons who want to deliberately misrepresent and misunderstand anything I say. Here's the thing about the fishermen. So they go to Venezuela, what is the fish? Because the best fish there. Meanwhile, it is believed, it is alleged, it is perceived that at least some fishermen, they don't actually fish. They catches other things that are not legal. It could be illegal immigrants. It doesn't have to be drugs. So the U.S. government has never requested any use of Trinidad and Tobago's territory for any military action against the people of Venezuela. That's an interesting way to put it. Against the people of Venezuela and against the Maduro regime are two separate things. Against the Maduro regime could be for the people of Venezuela or interpreted as such. Because the Minister of Public Utilities, he said something, and I wish he went further. I wish he explained further. He said that if a humanitarian crisis unfolds in Venezuela due to potential land attacks from the United States, the Prime Minister has already given her commitment that TNT will stand with the Venezuelan people. However, that does not translate an open-door immigration policy. TNT will continue to operate strictly within the parameters of the law to manage migration, which, technically speaking, that's what he's supposed to say. That's what he is supposed to say. Just because there is a crisis there does not mean we could just open the doors and close our eyes. Now, the issue I have is not that stance, but rather the lack of clarity with regards to what are the actual measures to be put in place to try to help the situation if there is a humanitarian crisis. Because you're saying that we stand with the people of Venezuela. And I'm not saying we open our borders and take 20 million Venezuelans. We can't do that. We will all drown. We will collapse this country under the weight of taking in far too many people far too quickly. We won't be able to absorb that many people. We won't have housing for them. We won't have food for them. We won't have any means for them to earn a living or to survive. we will basically be putting them and ourselves in a just as bad, if not worse, situation if we try to do anything like that. That is an extreme example. But that doesn't mean that you can't potentially, depending on how bad the violence gets, temporarily accept refugees, have plans to send aid, have plans to help deal with refugees and transitioning them, etc., etc. Now, again, our government, and this is one of the things with this situation, our government is not experienced in things like this. From Eric Williams on down, we've never done anything like this, I believe. I don't think we were involved in Greendot. We weren't involved, obviously, we weren't involved in anything to do with Panama, right? On this scale, at this level, we've never had to deal with a security, international security / diplomatic / humanitarian / military / whatever. So to some extent, I do have to kind of hold off and say, oh. But it would have been good if you could at least, indicate that you started to think through the problem of what can be done. Otherwise, saying you stand with the Venezuelan people doesn't really mean anything. And again, the Prime Minister said, we will not support anything that goes against the Venezuelan people. Well, like I said, that could be a very, very slick way to, it's a very specific phrase. It's a very specific phrase. Now, note, in the past, she said no to regime change. I don't know if she is subtly changing her position without being upfront with us, or if she's just reiterating it in a different way, but it's not necessarily comprehensive enough. Meanwhile, there's another thing with regards to this crime-fighting situation that I just wanted to point out. The Minister of Homeland Security says that enhanced technology and training courtesy the U.S. government, particularly in dealing with crime fighting, will be introduced to TNT. Now, on some level, I'm like, I don't know how much Marines are going to be dealing with crime fighting. But radar surveillance, Coast Guard patrols, maritime, sailing, etc. All right, fine, cool. Referring to the ongoing collaboration between U.S. military and TNT Defense Force, joint training exercises last month involving 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit. TTPS has benefited from similar programs in the past, but he points to programs that were being done in conjunction with the FBI, ATF, DEA. What are those things that the U.S. 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit are not, but those things are civilian law enforcement agencies. That's a very important distinction. One of the things, though, that bothers me, he's talking about training. Officers going for training, stuff like that. Cool. Accountability. Okay, cool. Now, the headline says, new US-based crime-fighting technology coming. And he said that, enhanced technology from the United States. Recent conversation with the U.S. officials were productive, noting their willingness to implement technology-based crime-fighting resources. There's a list of activities concerning law enforcement and technology that the Americans have spoken to us concerning, particularly Homeland Security, that they intend to introduce to us, and we intend to participate fully. Here's the thing, though. You want to know one of the things that the U.S. use as crime-fighting technologies to help their law enforcement agencies? You want to know to help their police services? One of the things that they use? Body cameras. To the point where one could argue there's too much body camera footage out there. But that's only if you're concerned about image over substance. All I'm going to say is this. The way how the minister has spoken about body cameras, I understand that he wants to prioritize bulletproof vests over body cameras, except, because I said, why not both? The body cameras are also there to protect the officers. You know, one of the ways to get officers killed, Mr. Minister, is if you have the police do things that the public questions and don't get satisfactory answers for. So then all of a sudden, the criminals start to think, I might as well shoot first and ask questions later. Because they'll assume we don't have to prove in the court of law that there's extrajudicial killings by the police. The criminals will start to assume it. So they'll shoot first and ask questions later. They don't always win, but they don't always lose. An officer did lose his life now trying to fight back against a robber in a restaurant. And that's just one case. There's, of course, the mud-in-the-face situation with PC Guilt. Shot from behind in the neck. Not by the alleged perpetrator, who I believe ended up dead in not too clear circumstances, if my memory serves correct. As in, we don't necessarily, I don't think that case, we got suspects and arrests and convictions in that murder case. You know how body cameras protect the officers? Because it will help facilitate an improvement in the trust and confidence with the public, which will then take the teeth out of the statement by Minister Sturge saying, better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Because when he said it, on some level, it was a very real statement to make. Technically, it was not proper for him to make it. But it struck a chord probably with a lot of people who have that concerns about fake police. So he's saying, don't worry about it now. You just shoot if you feel afraid and we'll sort it out later. Keep yourself alive. And Minister Alexander that come around and say, hold on, we can't say that, we can't say that. And I understand why, Minister, you had to now try to roll that back. But if you're concerned about that, maybe have the body cameras. Because the way how that whole situation was handled, bulletproof vests over body cameras. Oh, well, we'll get both. Oh, but mysteriously, the tender for the body cameras are too expensive. And we could get cheaper body cameras. You know, critical piece of equipment meant to safeguard not just the lives of the officers, but also their integrity, and by doing so, further safeguard their lives. We could do cheaper. So we just cancel the contract. We just cancel it. So now no more new body cameras. Meanwhile, pre-existing body cameras, oh, there's too much trouble. So let's just not wear those either. We have body camera footage. The PCA wants it. We're not giving PCA no body camera footage. We're not giving the public no body camera footage. And what does that do? You have indirectly furthered a situation that can be perceived that the police service has things to hide. Because you are not trying to solve the issue of transparency where you can. Let's not forget, U.S. law enforcement don't always look at local law enforcement with rose-colored glasses. Let's not forget this. I wonder what the U.S. law enforcement agency partners have to say about the Brent Thomas matter. How that looked. Diego Martin on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on air.
Good morning, Sean, and to all your listeners. I listened to your piece on the crime fighting and the radar, and where our current Prime Minister responded to a former, I think he's a lieutenant commander of the defense force. Right. Where he says we have proper working radar and we don't need any new radar to do anything. I think he doesn't understand. He has put himself and the rest of the Coast Guard and National Security personnel under the bus by saying that if we have radar and it's not working, then it's all well and good to get new one. But if you say you have radar and we continue to have open borders, then it's a competency of the human resources in the security apparatus, or have they compromised their integrity with respect to the operations of these personnel? And I'm going to juxtapose that with the Joint Select Committee meeting yesterday with respect to monopoly in the pharmaceutical industry, where it appears that the people responsible for managing that situation, integrity is compromised and complicit. And I'm going directly to the executive director of the Fair Trade Commissioner, Mr. Bevan, who was all over the place with respect to his responses from the chairman, Chairman Speaker Jack Deo. Now, I wanted to know why his disposition with respect to answering these questions was so timid. I look back at his background, and he is a well-qualified person. He's a lawyer. He has 2 masters. He has a master's from Harvard. He had every certification with respect to international trade, etc. And I am saying to myself, why was his disposition like that? And there's only one thing I could say. He was complicit and his integrity was compromised. He was caught with his pants down. Likewise, the Exim Bank CEO, I think is an Avin, he is compromised. And I look at the Fair Trade Commission board. The chairman was a fellow by the name of Aram Kisoon. You had a lady by the name of Calendar who came from the RIC, and she was under plenty pressure with respect to increases. So the whole board apparently did little when this was brought to the attention since last year, and it was spread all over the country during December. I think a UNC meeting that publicized it, and they did nothing. Why they didn't do anything? Were they facilitating the growth of one company? And that one company, the owner of that one company is a fella, you remember the KFC report? The KFC report, our Prime Minister gave this man to do an investigation into some the seabridge collapse, etc., etc. Why? What was the intent of the Prime Minister giving him to do that? For him to give a report that basically didn't basically identify the true cause of the problem. And there is a saying, you facilitate people to get richer and richer to help the poor. A quid pro quo with the chairman of this alleged monopoly in the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm calling again and again now. We need to have the COVID inquiry, the commissioner of the COVID inquiry, to find out where and how these people who appears to be monopolizing drug and pharmaceutical for the wider community, if that has anything to do with the COVID inquiry. Because remember, the COVID Commission of Inquiry in the UK 2 weeks ago was a damning realization of what Boris Johnson and his minister did. And you remember, we had a another prime minister, Minister of Health said, we are number one, based on a UK, I think Cambridge student did some sort of research. And if we took all the advice and we did everything parallel to what happened in the UK, then I suspect if we do a commission of inquiry into COVID now, we might end up with the same sort of result that UK inquiry is, a damning allegations. Because you've seen everything coming out now, and you've seen where a current government facilitated the monopoly of the pharmaceutical industry. You have the non-action of the Minister of Health. You had the non-action of the former Minister of Trade, Gopi School. All of these people tells me where we were at with that, because I'm very passionate of that, because I have to spend a lot of money on medication because of my challenges. And I'm seeing where I could have saved a lot of money if the government of the day had managed the situation better. I'll go and have a nice morning.
Thanks, caller. With regards to your last part, I'm not sure if we had a report that we would have the same findings in terms of what the actual negative outcomes are. I'm not saying that we won't find negative outcomes. I just think that it potentially will be different, right? So then now it's difficult to look at the UK report and try to just use that to determine what our situation was. However, because of course Boris Johnson in part he lost leadership of his party because he had a party and it came out. He had a party during COVID. He had a party with a lot of people and it came out and it didn't look good. And there are probably situations like that was rumored or speculated, reported, social media videos and posts during COVID that allegedly involved members of the government. Then there is the quarantine situation, who was allowed to come home situation. Then there is the who went to what hospital, blah, 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 blah. We have a colony line, I'll just say this. I suspect that what was done initially, with the exception of how we treated people stuck outside and the closing the borders, the maritime borders, but a lot of the stuff, a lot of the other stuff, with the initial response to COVID was generally fine. We got away with Carnival 2020, and one could argue we were lucky and that was irresponsible. But I don't know if the population would have accepted it because we didn't know, as a world, we didn't know about COVID yet, right? I knew about it, but I don't think a lot of people really understood what was going on. Lockdowns didn't really start happening globally yet. So, past the initial few months, however, that's when you get into some real questions. Shogun on Sunny Line, good morning, caller, you on here.
Good day, Sean.
Morning, morning.
Sean, do you know it's an actuarial report?
Well, it's a report done by an actuary.
Right, but you know what it does? And what it does, it estimates the revenue from investments. And I can't understand because the NIB have a requirement that they must do an actuarial report not more than 3 years apart. And it's on the basis of that they're supposed to set NIB. How on earth could the NIB money run out? And I have seen nobody think that. I could tell you why it run out. Because they also have a next actuarial report the politicians could call for their planning. And what Martin did when he was there, when the one for certain rates was supposed to be done, he told them he want a minimum of $1,000. At that time, the maximum was $700 and something. So that the net effect was when they put the amount of revenue and they put a minimum, nobody could get more than that. Everybody was getting the minimum. He didn't load the lesson. He went back 2 years after and he said he wanted a minimum of $2,000. The ILO warned him that that should not be done because you will be using people's contributions to pay out claims, and they would not be able to do it. He didn't take them on. When the government changed, Kamala come and say he want a minimum of 3,000. And that was the end. That is why it ran out. And that is the problem with this country. We never find out why we have a problem. We just come up with solutions without that. What we used to call killing ants by matching them. I don't know if you have any questions or queries.
No. It's been a while since I looked into that situation, so I don't want to...
Good. Check it.
Right, but I do have a general comment to make that's in line with why I think it happens. Not what happened or why it happened, but rather...
Where's the general comment?
Well, the general comment is this. I think a lot of people don't do their jobs because they don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to lose their jobs.
Who? Like who? If you are given to do an actuarial report, who then follow? No, but who then follow? You see, because the person doing the report, the actual actuary, isn't the one that's going to then deal with, implementing changes with the report. They just do the report. It's the person, it's the bodies, especially if they're appointed, if they're political appointees. The report is to review the payments. And part of the actuarial review job would be to suggest that the people could change it, of course, but they should be available so people could give the reasons.
If the politicians want a result, you think the public servants are going to fight it?
I used to do that.
I know, but the problem is we have allowed it to reach the point where the politicians have enough cachet, where they have enough ways to deal with public servants, and the public servants get victimized. We don't get a lot of examples, but I believe there are a couple situations like with
everything in this country is because of that.
You
look at the state of the road, you look at the traffic jam, you look at everything is because of politicians interfering with public service.
Just remember the permanent secretary was kicking up a fuss about money to pay whatever back pay last Christmas or the Christmas before, so they transferred them out.
Just you could transfer, but they can't fire you.
Yes, but on some level, I believe if you're a permanent secretary, you're a technocrat, so in some cases your technical expertise is not transferable.
Not necessarily a technocrat.
Not necessarily,
He's an
but
administrator.
Right, but the point is you spend time with a certain ministry to understand the intricacies of that ministry, and to go to another ministry is not always the most efficient use of resources.
Right, well, if the reason is proper, yes.
Well, that's the thing. Not half the time, let me not say that, but when it comes up, it doesn't seem to be all that proper.
No, the permanent secretaries could deal with any ministry because they rely on the staff under them, both the technical and administrative staff. But the report these people put up supposed to have include the reasons for it. And that is the problem.
All right, caller.
Okay,
I can't necessarily go too deep into that because that point was actually for a wider situation, and I believe it was with regards to Mr. Digicel was talking about the Defense Force situation, and then there was also I can't remember what it was, but he went on another point. It wasn't policing. But he was talking about the Defense Force situation, then he went into another point. I can't remember what it was. I don't know if guys, if you could remember for me after the Defense Force point. But in both situations, I came back to the same conclusion. At least with regards to Defense Force, like I said, I don't think the former administration had proper control over national security. Proper control, not control. Because there are certain limits to their control over the national security apparatus. Right? The Prime Minister can't go and tell the head of the Defense Force, hey, go and surround that house and pull the people out of that house and send them to the prisons. Can't do that, right? Police supposed to do investigations. They're supposed to be independent. The army is supposed to be used in certain circumstances, etc., etc. The army is not the personal army of the government. That's one of the signs that we are not yet a dictatorship, by the way. But you're supposed to still have proper control, proper oversight, right? You're the head of the government. You have a Ministry of National Security with a minister. You have a National Security Council. Meanwhile, it seemed as though the Defense Force apparatus was kind of doing whatever they wanted to do, which is, at times, the narrative that you think it's going on with certain aspects, other aspects of the public service, which is why, and this is why I think you could maybe apply that to whatever's going wrong, whatever oversight is lacking. The question is it intentional or unintentional? Right? I think it was with the pharmacy thing. That was the other point I was making. Is it intentional or is it unintentional? Because it's easy to assume it's unintentional because, A, it seems as though two entities are benefiting from a virtual monopoly. I believe the market share is 50% and 30-something%, right? Something like that. Two entities have the lion's share of the market, they're benefiting. Technically, it's not a monopoly yet because in theory, they're supposed to be competing against each other, but it all depends on the analysis of how they acted in competition with each other or not. How was this allowed to happen, one could say? Because the smaller pharmacies, they are now struggling because being priced out and the fact that they have these vertical integration cells. To be fair, the pricing out could just be a mechanism of a more efficient and competitive model, by these two larger entities that are vertically integrated. But we still ask the question, how could this happen, blah, 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 this is bad, blah, 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 blah. Now, again, the thing we have to ask is, what law was there to prevent it? Was there a law to prevent it? Because politicians can't come and just willy-nilly say, let's not allow that to happen. They have to have a law to prevent it, right? And it's very easy to just not want to actually put in effort and to just rock back and relax. So again, was it intentional? Hey, so-and-so is going to benefit and then we're going to get kickbacks and blah, 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 which a lot of people might assume is the case. Or was it unintentional? Why am I going to stress out for? Let them do the do. It's not illegal. I ain't going to interfere with it. And the thing is, with regards to the public servants down the line, they're like, I'm not going to rock the boat and mess up my check. Why am I going to do that? I think the FCB CEO, I can't remember who it was, but the transition of government, they had some things where it wasn't just all political cutthroat, it was some people were questioning things. I can't remember, there was a story about that recently where one of the people who may have been appointed by the government, I can't remember by the current administration or not, was not necessarily just accepting things as he was told, and thus was moved on from. Because heaven forbid, we don't just be lemmings, right? And similar things happen on the PNM. We have Stanton on the line. Good morning, Collie, on here. Morning.
Let me say this, talk about the first thing, this radar issue. The Prime Minister came out and said she requested assistance from the U.S. Okay? Now, on the face of it, that could be true. That she made a request.
Mm-hmm.
The circumstances surrounding why she made a request. Prior to, if you look at, remember she met Rubio in the U.S. So behind the scenes, there are a lot of stuff that would happen that the public wouldn't be privy to, and technically the Prime Minister could be correct, because they have to have a certain level of face saving with these issues.
Mm-hmm.
However, the radar systems that we have in Trinidad and Tobago that are operational, based on what they're saying about that radar, our radar systems, including the one that was given to us by the U.S. in 2023, can do what we need in terms of border protection. I heard you talk about if you're not sure if the radar systems or our radar systems could detect pirogues. Yes, it can.
What? Yeah, but
our radar systems that we have in Trinidad and Tobago right now can detect.
Hold on, I have to ask, what is the basis for that? Is it because they could detect small objects? Or do you know for a fact that they have
what do you mean by small objects? What do you mean by small objects?
Because there's a difference between a small object like a plane with a low radar return cross-section, right, or a bird. Because, right, they say, oh, well, you know, the F-22 is the size of a golf ball on the radar or something like that, right? But when you're on water, the problem is not just that you're small. There's a combination of the curvature of the earth, and if the water is rough.
Let me say this to you. What is the smallest plane that you know of?
A Cessna, I guess, or something like that, right?
Okay.
No, but like I said.
No. Let me finish.
Okay.
Those Cessna aircraft that you're talking about the smallest one is I think is a 152, a Cessna 152. We have the capability of detecting those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There is no doubt that we have the capability. What I'm getting at is our security services have not been effective in protecting our own borders.
Yeah, we can agree on that for sure.
Even now, imagine we have to, whatever aggression the U.S. have against Venezuela, and we play into it, and the Prime Minister, in my opinion, the Prime Minister, I am sympathetic to the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister has no choice in this matter. You know. The Prime Minister already hitched our wagon and wherever that wagon go, she have to go, while trying to make it seem as if she is not in favor of regime change in Venezuela. That being said, but our national security apparatus, have you seen anything different besides the U.S. blowing up those boats and things? That is how we intend to deal with our situation of drug smuggling into Trinidad and Tobago and look at the same human trafficking into Trinidad and Tobago. We have to depend on the U.S. Thank God the U.S. come to stop to put our armada in the Caribbean Sea there, so we could get protection when we have systems in place and we have people that we pay in every month. This is where we reach, and this is to the point of Shogunas, where we must have some level of self-integrity in terms of people doing the jobs. This is the problem in Trinidad and Tobago, you know. The public service is the way it is because the people in the public service, the PSAs, some of them, and a lot of the people underneath them didn't have the balls to stand up to the politicians and say, we're not doing that. And everybody has cow tongue and get favor and curry favor until it reaches to the point where it is today, where it is total chaos in those agencies. That anything goes, and whatever the politicians say, they do. They can fix this, you know. These institutions can fix themselves if that people strong enough, as Shagona said. They can't fire PS. That PS is something grievous for them to try to fire PS. They could just move them around. And if there have enough of them that have integrity and will stand up to them, they could move them anywhere because you only have a certain pool, and wherever they go, they will function according to what they're supposed to do, not what the politicians want them to do. I've known PSs who stood up to politicians already and get sidelined. They put them in the smallest ministry. We have the least amount. They do that.
Yeah.
And this is both administrations that we have seen in all the administrations around Tobago. They have done that when they can't get their way. But we have to stand up. Now let me go quickly to the pharmacy board. Not the wasn't a joint seat, like it was the other committee that met yesterday, talking about procurement of pharmaceuticals. Until the business people in Trinidad, who and Agostini, and they bought up Smith Robertson, and they bought up Superfarm. The government of Trinidad and Tobago have allowed this. There is no proper competition legislation to deal with monopolies in Trinidad and Tobago. There's none. And until they have some, we could sing until the cows come home. These people will be allowed to do this, and quite frankly, it is good business practice, you know, Sean. It is good business practice. And if I have shares in Agostini, you think I worried about that? I want a return on my investment. However, the people that are posing this new pharmacy owners association, they want to get in on the pie. Okay? They want to get in on the pie. They're talking about bringing generics into Trinidad and Tobago and have a problem with chemistry, food and drug, rigorous what do you call it? When they get testing, samples in, testing of the samples, which they are doing their job in the pharmacy, food and drug doing their job, you know. But they have a problem with it because they also want to get piece of the pie. And this is where this is only about money, you know. You think they really care about the health of of all these people? This is about money here in Trinidad and Tobago. It's about greed. It's about greed. I listened to it yesterday. It's about greed. This is where Trinidad and Tobago reached. This is where Trinidad and Tobago has reached, and Trinidad and Tobago has to try and fix itself. And we have a government now who got voted in. They have a majority, a constitutional majority, where they can change things, and they have not so thus far been using that constitutional majority to give us an indication of this is where we're going. You're doing the right thing, and that is why the country is still in on tender hooks. That's what's going on in Trinidad and Tobago. You would expect that with a win like that, you have people free, but people are not feeling that way.
No.
People are not feeling that way. And until they understand that this is about governance of the whole country, this is about they need to put aside the stupid party politics. You see, we had enough of that now. You win election. You're supposed to be in governance mode now. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I think that goes to what I've been saying for the last couple of months. Our politicians, what are you selected for? Let me use a tangential example. You go to school. If the school is teaching you how to pass an exam by memorization, you're basically told, hey, memorize this, we're telling you what to do. Don't think, just do this to pass, right? Then eventually, hopefully, you go to university. Maybe university starts to teach you, hey, this is how you're supposed to think critically. Some courses in secondary school do that. Maybe not all. It depends on the teaching style. Some teachers do it, some don't. I'm not too sure currently. I was fortunate to have some teachers that did it throughout my time in secondary and tertiary. Not all, because, you know, just do it. All right, fine. But then when you get into the workplace, what happens? You're a worker bee, you're a peon, you're not paid to think. Unless you have, like, you just got your master's and got a real good position off the top. You're not paid to think. Now, a lot of the people who end up in senior positions in yesteryear don't have all those credentials, particularly in the public service, but even in the private sector, they don't have all those credentials. A lot of business owners don't have a lot of credentials, at least the previous generation. And in a lot of cases also, people kind of work their way up and get their credentials as they go. Now, some people, they're superstars, they're rock stars. They learn to transition from the worker bee, I have to do what I'm told, to now I'm in charge, I have to actually be the one to exercise good judgment. I don't have anybody telling me what to do. I have to tell other people what to do. Not everybody can make that transition. Why? Because your metrics when you're a worker bee is how well you follow instructions, not what individual initiative you undertake. And in fact, just look at how governments run. You just said it yourself. They want public servants to follow instructions, not to have their own opinions. Now, in the political party system, what is being valued? What is being rewarded? What is being promoted? The ability to maneuver within the internal politics of a party. That's the skill set that matters the most. Not your ability to implement and write policy, not your ability to exercise good judgment and objective thinking, but rather party loyalty, political machinations within the internal structure, maneuvering and brown-nosing and, you know, shaking hands and pressing flesh with whichever supporter, financier, constituency, office, whatever, to improve your internal political position. Then, half the time, just go with it. You win an election, and now you have to govern. What part of internal politicking prepares you for governing? When you're trying to advance your internal party agenda, the only thing is the public relations for the party, your loyalty for the party, the public persona and how you represent the party, etc., etc., etc. None of that is with regards to how to implement good policy to improve the nation, how to manage the affairs of the nation. So what we have is various tiers of politicians, those with enough experience to know what they're doing in that regard, those with experience, but they still don't know what they're doing in that regard. Those with no experience, so it's obvious they're not supposed to know what they're doing in that regard, but in some cases, they're given way too much responsibility. And we get what we get. And we get what we get. And in part, that is not entirely the fault of the individual political leaders that we currently have, or that we had most recently. But at the same time, they're the leaders. So But that could be that we have an imperfect system that we just assumed is fine and we just allow to perpetuate over time. It's similar to, well, it's fine, you know, we just won't have a monarch. We'll appoint a president to act like the monarch, not understanding the reason why it works in the UK is that the monarch is independent of political parties, completely independent of political parties. In fact, the policy of the royal family in the UK is to be apolitical. That is their policy. Right? And at least so as long as Charles' sister is alive, I'm very certain that policy will be maintained because she ain't having none of that nonsense, right? But our president is appointed by the prime minister. At some point, you can't guarantee independence in a situation like that. You just can't. You can guarantee that the current president is more independent than usual because her term is crossing between two different administrations. But that's it. That's it. Right? And once you get the foundational piece wrong, the rest of it is going to be crooked. And it's not about the individual selected, because a system cannot be dependent on selecting the best people and the right people. That means you're compensating for the system. That doesn't mean that the system is working. That means that you might be working. But now, how often could we say that that is the case? That the individuals have risen above the system's deficiencies? With regards to the two things. One, it might have been installed in 2023. That does not mean that we got the most modern radar, right? It could or it could not, right? That does not indicate the age or the capabilities. It could be a new radar, but with downgraded capabilities. With regards to defense industries, sometimes the export market, you have export products which are not the same as your own equipment. That's point number one. So the fact that the US Marines, I assume, this is an assumption, they installed one of their units. Could be wrong on that. But that's one of the reasons why the belief, I believe they're operating it. And because they install something that they're operating, it's a lot easier to get permission to put their equipment out there as opposed to what they're giving to us or selling to us, right? The point about the pirogues is there's a difference between tracking a Cessna and tracking a pirogue, depending on the sea conditions. If it is calm seas, like in the middle of the Gulf of Paria, then fine. If it is in rough waters, depending on the size of the boat, and a whole host of other conditions and capability radar, because part of it too is the movement of the object, right, and how it will read on the device and to the operator, depending on the level of technology. And the software that governs the technology, because there could be ways to defeat certain software, operating software for radar systems, depending on the system, right? Rough seas will make it harder to track a pirogue, because depending on how rough the seas and how high the waves go, then the pirogue will kind of be lost in the undulations of the water, as opposed to being an aerial target, an aerial contact that doesn't have, you can have bad weather, but it's not the same as literally you're on the surface water. Radar won't necessarily penetrate surface water, right? Depending on the severity of the bad weather, you know, light rain, it could probably, you know, to some extent go through light rain and the like and blah, 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 blah. So, also, in theory, if there's a plane in the sky with no transponder, that's a very obvious, something's wrong there. Pirogues don't have transponders. Pirogues don't have the requirement to have transponders. So there's a lot, right? A military radar system is better equipped to deal with targets that don't have transponders on them, right? But anyway. The timing, though, is interesting. The timing is interesting. But as you point out, we needed to secure our situation. It is what it is. It is what it is. But the point that you made, that's basically the point I was trying to make too. No one wants to lose their job. No one wants to rock the boat. No one wants to upset the boss. I saw that firsthand, and to some extent I understand it, and it's only human. The problem is when we allow real normal human emotions to go too far. And now the question is, how often does that happen? And based on results, we could say it happens too often. Is it happening now? Well, we don't know to the extent yet. We haven't necessarily seen the severity of bad results. That's why you point this out now. I think this is the thing, right? You don't tell the baby after it fell when it tried to crawl out the crib, don't crawl out the crib. You know? You don't try to stop the baby from crawling out the crib after it tried to crawl out the crib and fell out the crib. You don't rush and scramble. No, you're supposed to rush and scramble before. You don't tell your child, don't put a fork in a power socket after he does it. I know that in some cases kids have to feel to learn, but there are certain things where you don't let them make the mistake. Some mistakes, fine. Some mistakes, fine. Or you didn't study for the test, you failed the test. You want to keep going, but you do intervene and say, hey, let's not fail no more tests now. You know, your future might be at stake if you go too far with this, needing to make the mistakes to learn from it. No, you don't let your child run into the road with oncoming traffic. Yeah, they have to feel to learn. No, you stop them from that before. The politicians take their cues from us. If we tolerate nonsense, they will continue with the nonsense and take it further. If we say no more nonsense, then they'll be like, oh, you don't want any more nonsense? All right, we'll have to adjust. That's all. Part of it is because we like it so. Because they are members of the public that want to call their MP or their councillor or their minister and say, I have a problem, so and blah, blah, blah. And it's not necessarily all 1%. When an athlete makes money, all of a sudden his whole community is like, we made money, that's our money. When your politician get through, we get through, it's we time. And how could it be we time if they start to govern responsibly? So, we have to take a hard look at ourselves, right? This situation in Venezuela, however it is resolved, it will resolve. And we'll still have our own issues to deal with after the fact, if we haven't dealt with them. All right, I almost forgot. Let's take the comments quick. Property tax was based on imaginary value. Tax-based actual income is not property tax. Now, to some extent, it's not supposed to be that way, but they were so inconsistent that your statement, I can't argue against it. Here's the problem. Not all of the criticisms of property tax was about valuation and the accuracy of it. Not all, right? Mainly, I believe it's because emotionally it would resonate more to just have a simplified message of the tax is bad. They didn't go into the specifics like how you're in the specifics. So, tax based on actual income is not property tax. Yeah, technically it is. It's just the valuation is different, right? Although they're saying it's not property tax, right? But technically speaking, if it's a tax based on actual income of the property, you could call it whatever you want, but to say that it's not property tax, that's an argument of semantics that I don't think you would win, but it is what it is. Let's see the next comment quick. Here's the thing. I try to be fair and objective. Don't expect that I always succeed, and don't be afraid to call me out for it. Let's have the debates. In part because exercising the issue with counterpoint from different perspectives makes the conversation more robust and better, the results better. Let's take the next comment quick. Please pray for Sri Lanka. I admit, there's so much stuff going on. I probably did see, I can't remember what's happening with Sri Lanka. Floods and landslides. There's a point where I do wonder the whole God is a tree thing if our luck is just too strong and we're spoiled. Because we just don't go through things like this. And I don't want us to go through things like this, but this is the part where like maybe we do need to feel to learn how good we should have it. And in our case, a lot of our issues are self-inflicted. We don't have a hurricane, a mudslide. We don't have repeated tropical storms, right? We almost have an aggressor to the south, but not really. Please pray for Sri Lanka. Yes, I agree with that. One of the things is there's a lot of tragedy around the world. It's not just based on what the Americans are doing or even what the Russians are doing. that doesn't get enough attention, or what the Israelis doing that doesn't get enough attention. And it makes me think that it's more political than actually wanting to highlight certain things. This is wanting to highlight a very real situation. Hopefully, things could change. But we can't be involved in our own political issues. How are we going to really follow other people's issues to try to do what we can? I don't know. That's a very heavy thing. Pray for them. There's not much we could do for them. All we could do is pray. And some people might say, oh, well, what good is that? At the very least, it reaffirms our own humanity, and it tells them that they are not alone. That's what it does. Thanks to all the callers and the commentators, or the commenters. This is talking about the WESN. I'll end with this. I do think that most politicians will hear what I want to say and hate me for it, because they'll just want to disagree. They'll assume that I want them to fail. Well, I am not a social media minister with his own social media propaganda show. I am not a political activist on social media in the employ of a certain political party. I'm just a guy on TV trying to have a conversation, start the discussion, give his perspective, kick ideas down the line, and maybe someone will pick up that ball and take it further to improve things. Like how many of the callers also participate and the commentators. It's not meant to encourage failure. It's meant to try to find a way to success. If we really want it, then we should be collaborative, not dictatorial in demeanor. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Have a good day. Be nice to those that believe in different political ideas to you, and do what you can to build that bridge or mend that bridge, not to burn it down. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are